Chapter 3. Iron Horses and Frozen Rivers. Who? The young boy instinctively asked, then suddenly realized that this person could not possibly be associated with the snow wolves. Frightened, he clutched his grandfather tightly, almost screaming. Hake Village had never had any Hami people visit. Even when taxes were to be collected, it was always other races sent by the Hami people, not the Hami themselves. So, in this area, there were wolves but no humans and humans but no wolves. Wolves and humans simply did not coexist. Is this the Haber household? I'm a friend of Lake Haber. The pleasant voice of a young man floated down from above. Dad, it's Dad's friend. Amy, hearing his father's name, nearly forgot everything else. He reached out to open the iron door latch, but the old man pulled him back. From the way you speak, you're not Hami, you must be from the Amy Empire, right? The old man asked in a deep voice. Yes, that's right. You must be Uncle Haber. Lake and I both serve in the Amy Empire's border guard, the young man replied. How are you with the snow wolves? They would kill anyone who's not Hami. The old man's tone carried suspicion. Oh, it's fine. I let them go. Uncle Haber, there's a special reason for it. I'm one of the few people from the Amy Empire who the snow wolves don't attack. The young man seemed to be speaking to the wolves inside the house. Hey brothers, let's go. I've got things to do. Xiao Bai, tell your brothers to leave the village. A deep, mournful howl echoed through the air, and the sounds of the snow wolves quickly faded away. The old man hesitated for a moment, then cracked open the iron door just enough to check for any remaining snow wolves. Once he confirmed there were none, he fully opened the door. A young man dressed in the simple military uniform of the Amy Empire stood by the bed. Seeing the old man emerge, he immediately stood up and politely bowed. Uncle Haber, hello. I'm a friend of Lake Haber from the army. My name is Hanfeng Chi, or you can call me Chi Hanfeng, whichever is easier for you. The man's surname indicated he was a descendant of an ancient Eastern race. Uncle, where's my father? Amy rushed out of the pit and asked urgently. The old man's face mirrored the same concern. Well, you may not believe it if I tell you. The young man replied seriously, I don't know either, that's why I came here. The general situation is like this. At Uncle Haber's gesture, the young man sat on the bed and began explaining why he had come to Hake Village. This story started with Amy's father leaving the village. The villagers of Hake, like most of the people along the Warmwater River, were mostly migrants from the Amy Empire or the Holy Church. This area was surrounded to the north by a 1,000-kilometer-long and 200-kilometer-wide snow forest. To the east was the Warmwater River Forest, the only non-coniferous forest on the frozen continent, spanning a vast area of roughly 300 kilometers in width. The south and west were bordered by the sea. The Amy Empire had no authority to build ports here, and due to the climate, the Hami Kingdom also refrained from doing so. So, once people migrated here, they rarely left, especially first-generation immigrants like Uncle Haber. The young man was different. Lake Haber had spent his childhood in the Northern Federation of the Empire. After growing up in Hake Village, he developed a restless spirit and was unwilling to stay in one place for too long. Determined to see the world, he wanted to venture out. Uncle Haber was clear about his stance. Young people needed to go out and experience the world while they still had the chance, for life was too short to stay in one place. Thus, 10 years ago, during the most recent Amy Empire invasion, 20-year-old Lake Haber joined the Imperial Army as a guide. Chapter 3. Iron Horses and Frozen Rivers, continued. In the year 187 of the Red Moon calendar, 5 years ago, Lake Haber, who had risen through the ranks in the Amy Empire's border guard to become a battalion commander, used his leave to return to Hake Village with his 2-year-old son, Amy. Lake Haber's wife, after giving birth to Amy, became weak and could not withstand the harsh cold of the frozen continent. She passed away after just a year. Meanwhile, Lake Haber's busy military career left him unable to care for his son. The young man had no choice but to leave the responsibility of raising his energetic son to his elderly father. Amy had long known the story of his parents, and he knew even more details than Hanfeng Chi did. However, the next part of the story was the real reason Hanfeng Chi had come to Hake Village. Also in the year 187 of the Red Moon calendar, Hanfeng Chi was reassigned from the capital of the Ami Empire to the Northern Federation's border guard, where he served as the cavalry battalion commander of the Snow Moon Legion. Upon returning to the army, Lake Haber discovered that the former cavalry battalion commander had been reassigned, and in a formal visit, he met Hanfeng Chi. According to Hanfeng Chi, in the following series of operations, Lake Haber, who was then the commander of the Glacier Infantry Battalion, had saved his life multiple times. In 188 of the Red Moon calendar, Hanfeng Chi, newly appointed as battalion commander, led a squad to pursue snow beastmen that had been harassing the border. However, unfamiliar with the terrain, Hanfeng Chi and his team were led into the cold ice valley, 50 kilometers deep into the snow forest. Originally intending to eliminate the snow beastmen, the cavalry battalion charged down the valley, only to realize that the snow beastmen had escaped via ice ledges on both sides of the valley. The cavalry, charging down the 30-degree slope, soon found themselves stuck. The descent had taken only half a day, but the return would prove impossible. The horses lacked the strength to climb the icy slope, and they could not overcome the slick ice. Upon hearing of Hanfeng Chi's predicament, Lake Haber immediately assessed the situation and concluded that the worst-case scenario had occurred. He led the Glacier Infantry Battalion through the night, using sledges to reach the cold ice valley. Using the blankets they carried, they created a non-slippery path, saving the entire Snow Moon cavalry from certain annihilation. Such instances of individual rescue and assistance occurred several times, but Hanfeng Chi mentioned them simply, focusing more on their cooperation and friendship. In 191 of the Red Moon calendar, at the end of the year, Hanfeng Chi, now serving as cavalry battalion commander, and Lake Haber, still in charge of the Glacier Infantry Battalion, received orders from the governor of the Northern Federation. They were to escort the Empire's Grand Mage to the Ice Wishing Tower in the Northern Hami Kingdom, where the mage would undergo a trial. One battalion's task was simply to escort the mage out of the Empire's borders, while the other battalion had the responsibility of escorting him all the way to the Wishing Tower. In the history of the Empire, there had been 342 Grand Mages, of which 134 had voluntarily entered the Wishing Tower for trials. Of these, only 15 had chosen the Ice Wishing Tower. However, only 3 of them successfully completed the trial. Of these 3, 1 ended their trial after 5 years, while the other 2 completed their trials after more than 10 years. In their magical diaries, these 3 mages described the experience as being thrown into an icebound dimension, where they would undergo a series of trials to enhance their magical skills. The escort mission was to deliver a state letter to the Hami Kingdom and the Northern Hami Kingdom, and it took the army through 3 of the most dangerous regions on the frozen continent: the Trial Cave, Dragon's Tooth Mountain, and the Ice Forest. The dangers of the Ice Forest included snow wolves and snow beasts, with frequent risks of getting lost and being unable to resupply. Dragon's Tooth Mountain was rumored to be home to ice dragons that had attacked both travelers and military convoys. As for the Trial Cave, the most recent account came from 56 years ago, when a previous escort mission lost 60% of its men while traversing the 150-kilometer cave to the Wishing Tower. Such missions were nothing short of a dance with death. No one expected to return unscathed. Over the past 4 years, Lake Haber and Hanfeng Chi had completed many missions together, but this was the first time they had quarreled during one. Hanfeng Chi's voice shifted slightly, making both Amy and his grandfather's hearts tighten. Only those who had lived on the frozen continent knew its true dangers. The frozen wilderness was common here. Storms could last for 10 days, and snow could pile up to 3 meters deep. In such conditions, the entire population within hundreds of miles could be buried alive, suffocating under the weight of the snow. The wild beasts that survived in this world were extraordinarily powerful and destructive, and the humans who managed to survive in this environment were much tougher and more formidable than those from other continents. According to the planned route, we've exited the ice forest. Hanfeng Chi continued, but his voice faded into a recollection of past events. For the Ami Empire's Snow Moon Legion, operating near the ice forest had become routine. After several encounters with snow beasts, both battalions had safely entered Hami Kingdom's territory. However, The argument between Lake Haber and Hanfeng Chi arose when it came to deciding which battalion should return to the Empire and which should continue the escort mission. Both men acknowledged that the mission was highly dangerous, so both were eager to volunteer. Lake Haber attempted to convince Hanfeng Chi to go back by offering two reasons. He had no heirs. In snowy terrain, cavalry could become more of a burden than an asset. In Hanfeng Chi's view, these reasons were precisely why Lake Haber could not continue. If something happened to Lake, his son would be left an orphan. In snow, horses could move faster, and if trouble arose, the horses could be slaughtered for food. The knight would then become an infantryman, which was no worse than the glacier infantry. In the end, the two longtime friends, 5 years of shared experiences, began to fight. Well then, let the stronger man go. The stronger has a better chance of survival, Hanfeng Chi said confidently. Since the age of 5, Hanfeng Chi had attended the Empire's Junior Knight Academy, where he excelled in martial skills. By 19, he had passed a prestigious trial and become a recognized knight. As he spoke, however, his voice suddenly faltered. Amy and his grandfather, deeply focused on the conversation about Lake Haber's life and death, did not notice the subtle change in his tone. The duel between the two was held in private. The result of the duel was something Hanfeng Chi could never have imagined. Lake Haber gained a clear and overwhelming advantage, defeating Hanfeng Chi in a single strike. In the past, during their joint missions, the cavalry battalion often performed assault tasks, while the glacier infantry battalion was responsible for holding the line or drawing the enemy's attention. Hanfeng Chi had rarely seen Lake Haber engage in combat directly, and out of respect for his friend, a seasoned hunter from the wilderness, he had never inquired about his martial skills. This time, however, the confrontation was inevitable. Hanfeng Chi, mounted on his steed, charged toward Lake Haber with his lance, no tricks or tactics involved. Amid the swirling snow, Lake Haber met him head-on, his two-handed greatsword smashing directly against the lance. Hanfeng Chi felt a jolt in his hand as the impact forced the lance out of his shield's defense zone. Lake Haber quickly retreated. When a knight's lance and shield were exposed like that, it usually meant certain death. Hanfeng Chi immediately regretted not using his two-handed spear instead. If he had, this wouldn't have happened. "Enough, brother," Lake Haber said, patting Hanfeng Chi on the shoulder. "This is our fate." Lake Haber's voice grew solemn. "My son is 7 this year. I had hoped to bring him to the ice fortress soon and let him train there, but now, this task falls to you. Take care of him. If I don't come back..." Hanfeng Chi's voice faltered. This happened 11 months ago. His eyes grew misty as he recalled the events. "My father, did he die?" 7-year-old Amy anxiously asked, barely able to contain his confusion. Hanfeng Chi paused, then spoke slowly as though weighing his words. "I don't know. A month ago, soldiers returning from the Wishing Tower said that a barrier storm occurred when the Grand Mage entered. The storm not only sucked the mage into the barrier, but also attacked the nearby soldiers. Your father rushed to the Wishing Tower's entrance to secure the door, trying to prevent the storm from spilling out. But when he used his greatsword to brace the door, he was sucked in with it." Amy, who had been listening intently, frowned. "Will he return? What's a barrier storm?" Hanfeng Chi gave a simple answer, his tone a little softer than before. "He should return, but we don't know when. You're still young. When you're older, you'll understand. Maybe, you'll even be the one to save your father." In the year 192 of the Red Moon calendar, an unfamiliar man named Hanfeng Chi, introduced as Amy's distant uncle, became a member of Hake Village. Oddly enough, from the day he arrived, the snow wolves that had once come to Hake Village to collect taxes never returned. In the eyes of later generations, Mercenary King Amy is often seen as someone who had a myriad of opportunities, which led to his later success. However, among the many quotes Amy left behind, one phrase he repeated often but which nearly all of his descendants have conveniently forgotten is, "To gain 100-fold, one must give 1,000-fold." A single sacrifice may not yield results, but repeated sacrifices will inevitably bear fruit. Few knew just how much Amy despised that phrase when he was younger. The Memoirs of Elder Sage Lei Jun. Chapter 4. Baptism of Snow and Fire. Son, wake up, a cheerful young man's voice rang out just as the first light of dawn began to break. Uncle Chi, let me sleep a little longer, just a little longer. I'm so tired, groaned the sleepy little boy. It was 5 a.m., and like most children his age, 8-year-old Amy was no exception. Hoping to get just a few extra minutes of sleep wasn't an unreasonable request. It's freezing. A miserable cry shattered the stillness of the early morning darkness, though by now, the neighbors near the Harper family's humble cottage were well accustomed to this unique alarm clock. Little Amy leapt out of his snowy, ice-cold bedding with lightning speed, glaring at the perpetrator of the prank. The culprit, grinning mischievously, set down the large wooden basin he had filled with snow and said with a lazy air, "I always regret not having gone through rigorous training when I was young. My lack of discipline back then was entirely my father's fault, and as a result, I never achieved much. I won't let you grow up feeling the same regret. I want to raise you to become a warrior even greater than your father. I expect 100-fold in results, so, son, you must put in 1,000-fold in effort." Under the still dark sky of early morning, two figures, one large, one small, left Hike Village, jogging along Warmwater River towards Snow Moon Lake. Poor little Amy was forced to run while being coerced into singing some absurdly embarrassing songs. 1, 2, 3, 4, I love my dad, Chi Hanfeng. Chi Hanfeng leads us forward, march forward. Beyond the mountains, across the river, there's Chi Hanfeng. So clever and so quick. Truly, it took a certain kind of self-satisfied individual to make such a scene, someone with a tenacity comparable to a cockroach. Chi Hanfeng was a peculiar man. Anyone meeting him for the first time would think he was a noble. Across the empires, aristocrats shared common traits: a noble demeanor, elegant speech, and impeccable manners. Chi Hanfeng exuded these qualities upon first impression. But after spending more time with him, people inevitably discovered his other side: mischievous and an incurable prankster. Within 2 months of moving to Hike Village, this outsider had pranked nearly every local resident. Eventually, people believed his own description of himself: a soldier, the son of a fallen noble family, with the lowest-ranking noble title of Imperial Knight. This title was neither hereditary nor came with any expectation of land. The one who suffered the most from his antics, however, was poor little Amy. This unconventional uncle insisted on calling Amy his son. From the day Chi Hanfeng arrived, Amy hadn't slept in even once. This man gave the boy no free time at all. Though he never resorted to physical punishment, his methods were often far worse. Sprinkling snow in the bed was merely child's play for Chi Hanfeng. His more diabolical pranks left Amy wishing he could neither live nor die. One wonders how Lake Harper, currently residing at the Tower of Ice's Prayers, would feel if he knew he had entrusted his son to such a friend. Even Grandpa Harper, at first, struggled to accept the way this young man treated his grandson and especially disliked how he called Amy's son. However, after some time living together, the old man gradually warmed to their new family member. What truly touched the elderly man were Chi Hanfeng's small acts of care for Amy after he had fallen asleep, tucking in the boy's blankets late at night, preparing the next day's lessons by lamplight, chopping firewood until his hands were bloody, and waking up early to fetch snow. Amy's daily routine looked something like this. Physical training. Before dawn, Amy had to wake up and run along Warmwater River to Snow Moon Lake, a distance of roughly 20 kilometers. The snowy, icy terrain along the riverbanks made movement difficult. Chi Hanfeng insisted on light gear for running, meaning Amy could only wear a thin leather coat. Willpower training. Upon reaching Snow Moon Lake, Amy was required to strip down and swim in the lake. Snow Moon Lake, formed by an underground spring, had extremely high water temperatures. While Amy only swam near the edges rather than the scalding center, the water at the edges was still hot enough to boil snowbird eggs. Jumping straight from freezing cold into boiling water was indeed a test of willpower. Like most hot springs, the lake's water possessed excellent healing and restorative properties. No matter how grueling the previous day had been, Amy would always feel fully refreshed after his time in Snow Moon Lake. Swimming back. After an hour of mental and physical endurance training in the lake, Amy had to swim back to Hike Village along Warmwater River. However, this part of the routine only lasted a year. One time, Amy was so exhausted that he fell asleep while floating in the river. The high mineral content made the water extremely buoyant, allowing him to drift effortlessly. Since the river flowed towards the village, Amy began using this time to nap. That is, until one day when he drifted past the village and into the sea. Chi Hanfeng, waiting in the village for half an hour without seeing Amy return, frantically borrowed a boat. He eventually found the boy sound asleep 5 kilometers offshore. After that incident, Amy's floating naps came to an end. Battle technique training. Back in the village, Amy's battle technique training consisted of chopping wood. When Amy questioned the connection between chopping wood and battle skills, Chi Hanfeng scratched his head. He said, honestly, I don't know. All the other training was my idea, but this one came from your dad. Sure enough, this seemed to be Lake Harper's doing. When Amy visited the villagers to offer free firewood, most of the older residents exclaimed, truly a Harper child through and through. Clearly, woodchopping had been a Harper family tradition for generations. If the Harper family ever rose to prominence, their family crest would surely feature an axe. By noon, the residents of Hike Village would bring sleds loaded with freshly cut conifer wood from the nearby forest to the humble Harper family cottage. Anyone who has ever chopped wood knows that the axe is the most critical tool. The thicker the wood, the larger the axe needs to be. Most importantly, the design of the axe head, the back should be broad, and the blade, though not necessarily razor-sharp, must connect smoothly to the back of the axe head. This allows the V-shaped structure of the axe to efficiently split the wood upon impact. Although Chi Hanfeng made chopping wood a mandatory part of Amy's daily training, it was evident that this fallen nobleman had little knowledge of woodcutting. Even with the largest double-handed axe, he struggled to split even the softest non-coniferous wood. Grandpa Harper, however, understood his son's intentions. During his grandson's woodchopping lessons, the old man meticulously taught Amy how to use his arm strength, engage his core, and position his feet to maximize force. He also taught Amy how to read the grain of the wood, identify the easiest lines to split, and tackle tricky knots or forked branches. Ironically, the one most fascinated by Grandpa Harper's lessons wasn't young Amy, it was Chi Hanfeng. Oh, so that's the trick. Chi muttered thoughtfully. That explains why that guy always hits the weakest point of my spear in a duel. Even on snowy ground, he stays perfectly balanced and absorbs my impact effortlessly. From that day on, 2 figures, one large, one small, could be seen chopping wood in the rundown yard of the Harper family home. Initially, Amy's chopping speed was painstakingly slow. The primary obstacles were his lack of strength and improper axe handling technique. Despite carefully selecting the wood grain, his axe would inevitably strike off course. Without Uncle Chi's help, the 200 households in Hike Village might have gone without firewood for the winter. During Amy's first year of training, he started with the largest axe available. However, by the second half of the year, the axe was downsized, while the diameter of the logs grew thicker. After a long day of hard labor, Amy's day was far from over. Under the dim light of a snow pig oil lamp, Chi Hanfeng would teach him various subjects. In Amy's eyes, this was where Uncle Chi truly shone. As a noble, regardless of rank, his knowledge of imperial history was unparalleled. And as a former captain of the Snow Moon Legion, Chi's understanding of coordinated combat among military units was far beyond what the average villager could comprehend. Each evening alternated between lessons on military strategy and imperial history. While Amy had little interest in imperial history, Chi insisted it was essential for wooing ladies. Ladies? What did that mean? For many years, Amy thought it was some sort of delicious food. It wasn't until he was 15 that he finally understood. What Amy enjoyed most, however, were the casual conversations after the lessons. Chi Hanfeng would often share tales of life in the imperial capital, recount folk stories of mercenaries and wars, and occasionally mock the reigning King Redstone or some prominent noble family. One night, noticing how captivated Amy was by stories of mercenaries, Chi Hanfeng asked, Why are you so interested in mercenaries? Amy answered truthfully, because mercenaries hunt snow wolves. Being a mercenary is my greatest dream. Chi Hanfeng nearly fell off his four-legged stool. He couldn't fathom how the son of an imperial infantry commander and his own pupil had such an unorthodox aspiration. In the eyes of the regular army, mercenaries were the lowest of the low. How had these two produced such a rebellious child? 2 days later, Chi Hanfeng came to terms with Amy's ambitions. Financially speaking, mercenaries of the same rank earned far more than regular soldiers, though the risks were significantly higher. A mercenary of equivalent experience was often far more skilled in one-on-one combat than a soldier. For Amy, becoming a mercenary could greatly accelerate his growth and possibly prepare him for entry into the Tower of Prayers far earlier than expected. After all, working as a mercenary was infinitely better than serving the state or the greedy, oppressive King Redstone. Before the rise of the mercenary king, swordsmen were considered a low-ranking military unit, rarely utilized as a major force in warfare. However, under the dazzling brilliance of Lord Amy, more and more battlefield commanders and professional mercenaries began adopting long swords. Dual-wielding swordsmen eventually evolved into a fully fledged system. 4 new units emerged in official military ranks. Great sword divisions with flatland breakthrough capabilities rivaling that of battle-axe warriors. Dual-wielding swordsmen, excelling in ambushes and surprise attacks in all combat environments. The terrifying elite dual-wielders known as battlefield phantoms or vulture greatswordsmen. Long-range combat units combining attack and defense, inheriting the legacy of the mercenary king's swordsman. Excerpt from the Comprehensive Guide to Swordsmen by Chi Hanfeng.